All right, everybody, welcome to the Alive and Free podcast. We're doing something different today. It's been a long time. We've been running this podcast for since 2019. What is that? This is a long time. Okay, 7 years. We've got
7 years.
hundreds of episodes, and most of them are me and the people on my team talking about the things that affect human suffering, that affect anxiety and depression and addiction and trauma and all of the stuff that we deal with, teaching people how to handle stuff. We rarely have people on the show. I had someone in the beginning, early on, talking about nutrition. I had somebody a little while back discussing marriage relationships and stuff who was pretty good, and that was about it. But recently, a bunch of people asked, and I normally turn everybody down, but a bunch of people reached out and they're like, hey, uh, this might be useful for your audience. And I thought, you know what? Maybe it's worth a try to bring somebody on. And fortunately, Thomas Thatcher has come on as our guinea pig, basically, to not suffer
Ah,
through the whole thing. He always wants to be a guinea pig, I'm sure. Um, but basically, to have conversations around the same topic and to get different people who have discovered different angles of discussing the same thing in the hopes that those of you in the audience who are listening might have not just the analogies I've come up with, not just the things I've talked about, but maybe different set of arsenal and different set of resources. So, Thomas, welcome.
thank you.
Uh, you
Welcome.
you are based in Salt Lake City, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and you have come on, and you have over the years, we were discussing a little bit before the show started. Over the years, you have developed a way of looking at human suffering that you have labeled the Tack Philosophy, which we can see on your screen is there's a picture of a chair with a tack on it, which is a lovely image. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Is it about school pranks? What's it about? Tell us more.
No, no, it's a very real story.
Hmm.
And what happened is that I was in the family business, and I got kind of in a situation like Harry of Prince Andrew and Harry, kind of feeling like the spare son.
Hmm.
And so I really relate to the story of Joseph and his coats of many colors and how he was the favored son and the brothers were also Rands or whatever. And I developed a very destructive story that caused me a lot of not only pain, but suffering, feeling that I was very isolated in the family business. So, my brother was ahead of me, and my father kind of, I felt, gave him, putting his arm around him and say, okay, now you're going to be the guy in charge and you're going to be the successor and whatever. And then I was saying, well, what about me? Where do I sit or whatever? And so he had an office next to my dad's. I was put upstairs, not included in meetings or whatever. And boy, this started to formulate a story that I got very attached to and felt very real. And I think one of the things that I want to tell your listeners is that these stories are real. They're not just something that, as that there's something that's happened, but they're very real to you. They mean a lot to you. And so I'm not saying that those stories don't have validity, because, usually the technique to get off this is this, oh, well, your story doesn't mean anything. You didn't have any feelings or whatever. And that's not true. But I got into a real problem, got into bitter feelings for my father. And depression to me is all about repressed anger. I really believe that that's what depression is. It's the body's way of saying, if I can't find some way to get this anger out, and you're not going to let me get this anger out, or I have to get this anger out, I'm going to repress it. And it's going to then, kind of build up to the point where you feel so discouraged that you become suicidal, which is what I did. And my hatred to my father was so bad that he finally said, hey, why don't you go talk to a friend? And I said, okay, I mean, I've got nothing else to lose, so I'll go talk to a friend. So I went in and talked to his friend, and he says, Thomas, I want to tell you a story. I said, okay. He said, there are three people. The first person sits on a tack and says, wow, that's painful. I'm off it right now. I'm not going to sit on that.
Hmm.
Second person sits on the tack and says, well, it's really not it's painful, but I'll find a way to kind of compensate. So I'll put something underneath me or whatever to insulate it. But he's still on the tack. He's just not suffering and in pain. And then the third person is sitting on the tack, is in excruciating pain, but refuses to get off.
Mhm.
That is when he went to me and looked straight in the eye and said, Tom, what person do you think you are? And then it all came to me in an awareness type situation that I was being attached to this story that was causing me suffering. And because it gave me payoffs of not having to be responsible, not having to be controlled, not having to be dominated, then I could really run with the story. And then it became what I call the racket, a fixed way of being where you kind of live by your story. And
Mhm.
that's how the tack philosophy was all born. So the tack then is basically that story that you're attached to that causes you suffering.
Okay. So tell me this. I think there was an interesting piece that a lot of people don't get, which is this awareness of the payoff that you're getting by holding the story. Most of the stories that people deal with, the people that I work with, that they're it's a miserable story. It doesn't feel good. I'm not the favorite son or whatever in your case, and then other people have these stories about not being good enough or God hates them or they're a disappointment or, you know, and they don't realize that there's a possible payoff from it. Can you want to talk a little bit more about this awareness that you had where you realized there was a payoff to holding on to sitting on the tack?
Well, yeah, I mean, the payoff comes like, for example, let's say you don't get a raise and you've been working hard in the job. Then you say, okay, well, if they're not going to give me a raise, I'm not going to work that hard. I'm not going to try to be, that good of an employee or whatever. And you feel justified. Hey, they treated me wrong. What's the deal? When there is a judgment that a society does not like, they say, well, I can riot and loot and I can destroy stores and I can rob and steal because look how unjust that was. That's all about the payoffs. The
Mm,
problem is that you don't understand that the payoffs can become so high that then you're absolutely blinded to what the costs are. And then when you can try to grab your story and try to unravel it, then you can go in and say, oh my gosh, what is this costing me? Because, I got to be not responsible at Thatcher Company, especially as the boss's son. I came to work late if I wanted to. I didn't have to, really be responsible for anything. Nobody could dominate me. You can't control me, whatever type situation. I mean, what's a father going to do to a son in that situation? But what were the costs? Lack of love, lack of friendship, hard relationships with others. Because, it's like when you have a spill in a lake. The spill just doesn't stay there. It keeps spreading and spreading and spreading and spreading. And so when you're on it, it starts with the people you're very close to, but then it spreads and spreads so that even your friends and even people that you meet you have a hard time of just saying hello, how are you, or being in a very good mood, and then you feel, where they go, wow, what's wrong with this person? And you can say to yourself, hey, I'm completely justified by being this way because let me tell you exactly all the things that happened to me, and so therefore I'm justified of exactly the way I'm feeling. And that's the problem with the tack, because when you're on it, every reason that you have to justify being on it is usually a lie. So, for example, my father hated me. No, he didn't hate me. My brother hated me. No, he didn't hate me. My father didn't want me to see. No, that's not true. None of those were true. But when you're on it and you're caught up into it, it can overtake you to a point where you can't even see rational thought.
yeah. I mean, a lot of the research around depression is indicative of when you're in a depressed state, it is virtually impossible for you to imagine a positive future because that's the lens you're looking through is the state you're in. So when you feel miserable,
Absolutely.
then the
I
stories feel
agree with
true.
that. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I agree with that.
okay, so this makes it sound easy then, right? Oh, if I can just realize that I'm on the tack, I'll just get off, and it's that easy. Was it that easy? Like okay, you realize, oh
Absolutely
man.
not.
Okay, so
Absolutely not.
walk us through that. Like, okay, I have this realization. How long did it take for you to realize the cost? You have somebody going, which one are you? Which person are you? Are you the one on the tag? And so you have this moment that kind of cuts through your story a little bit. But then was like, how long did it take for you to start to shift things? And what did you put it? What did you do to be able to make those shifts?
Well, I use the story in the book about the mouse going for the cheese.
Hmm.
When the mouse goes for the cheese and the cheese not there, he might go look for it one more time. But then he says, "Hey, it's not there. I'm going to another place." Now, some humans are like that, but some are not. And they're saying, no, that cheese has got to be there. No, no, it's got to be there. I'm going to go back again. No, for heaven, it's got to be there. I'm going to make sure it's there, whatever. And for me to be able to get off the tack meant that I had to now become responsible. And wow, what do you mean now I have to become responsible? Well, now you really have to put in a lot of effort. Now you have to be to work on time. Now you have to be the hardest worker there. Yeah, but look at all this that they're doing and all that. Well, see, that's what's then driving you right back on the tack. So it's like you break a leg and your leg heals. You don't go run the 50-yard dash. You're kind of, gingerly getting back and whatever. Or you've been on a ship for several years and you haven't been on land, and finally you get on land. You got to get your sea legs back. It's just not something that's just a switch like that, because not only do you have to realize that the costs are so high, but then you have to say, oh, yeah, but now I have to be responsible. That means I have to kind of clean up the mess I made. That means I kind of have to face what I did. That means I have to, you know, really take positive action. And because I have to do that, then I don't get to control the environment like I was controlling before. Because kind of when you're on the attack in a depressed state, you're kind of in a control situation where you say, no, I'm going to control the narrative and I'm going to control exactly how things are happening. But when you get off, no, it's then you got to get back to real life. And that means what? I got to think about other people. What? Other people take some of priority over me? What? I'm not the only person in the entire universe? What? Other people have problems? I mean, all those things you have to face, and it becomes a real challenge. So
So
it is not just a get off and whatever, but when you've been on it a long time, as I was, it took a period of time, then I would revert right back, period of time, revert right back, and eventually the cost got so much that I said, okay, I've had it. I'm enough. I'm not going to do it anymore.
yeah, and so did you have any like guardrails or tips or tricks or things you did when you realized you were reverting that helped you get off quicker?
Yeah, well, what you have to, I think one of the biggest tips was is that it's kind of like the stock market. You know how the stock market, it goes up, but then it goes down and goes up and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down. But if you put a big kind of highlighter on it, it's generally going up. That's kind of what happens to you with the situation with the TAC. And so one of the biggest things is just taking very small steps. Like I remember I was, trying to get in shape and I was walking up this hill. And I walked up the hill, and after a while, it was like, I gotta stop. I can't breathe anymore, whatever. So then I try a little bit more the next day and a little bit more the next day. And eventually I'm walking up that hill without any problem. And I live by a good saying that I learned in my church, that when you persist at a task, the task becomes easier, not because any nature of the task has changed, but your ability to do it has increased. And so the tack is something that you get in the habit of doing, and it's not that you can't get back on the tack, but when you get back on the tack, you say, no, I'm immediately off. And so before, when I was staying on the tack, I was staying on there for 6 months, 7 years, 20 years, whatever. Now, when I'm getting on the tack, I go, oh, yeah, I can get off it in about a month, or I can get off it in about a week. And now I've got to the point where I said, okay, no, I can get off it really, really fast. And I think the longest now I've stayed on the tack has been no longer than a day. That's been the longest. I've realized it. I've understood the pain. I said, no, this is not where I want to go, and off I go. And it's so it's a gradual process.
Okay. The what's interesting is a lot of people don't look at that as a win. So often people come to me, they're dealing with like pornography addiction, or they're dealing with um, traumatic events from their childhood, or anger, repressed anger, or whatever else that's ruining the relationship and whatnot. And their immediate response is, "I want this thing gone out of my life." Like they want control. They just want the kind of control that makes everything, they're still looking for control, and without being able to admit that there's less than 1% of life they'll be able to ever control. And so the idea that, like, wait, it's hard afterwards, and then there's no guarantee that I won't sit back down on the tack, is one that doesn't really ring. It's not like a sales pitch that you can be like, take this pill and everything will be better. So it's like not a glamorous thing, but it feels like it's not glamorous because it's the truth. That there are no guarantees. You never know what circumstances will come up that will maybe make you start to feel this way again, or you might start to have these other types of thoughts. And so when I share with them, like, I'm like, I don't have any guarantees that I'm not going to go back to all the stupid things that I used to do. All I know is that right now, what I've developed is a set of skills that enable me to no longer be a victim to those experiences, but rather to be able to navigate them well. Just like a sailor at sea, if a storm comes up, it's not like you'll ever be able to control the storm, but you can steer the boat. Have you found that to be the case in your life, where you're like no longer afraid of those experiences?
Well, yeah. Well, let me answer some of your thoughts first. First of all, let's take the word guarantee out and instead substitute it with possibility. Yes, there is no guarantees, but there is possibility. So, for example, if we make a declaration, I mean, let's say, we're in the elementary school, and there's Bill Clinton in the elementary school, and he goes in and says, "I'm going to be the next I'm going to be a president of the United States one day." Well, there's no guarantee of that, but there is a possibility now that did not exist before. And when you talk about the situation, pornography and everything, that's just compensation. You're on it. If you're into porn and doing all that stuff, you're just easing the pain. You're not facing the responsibility. You're saying, I've got to have this in order. And you've convinced yourself that that's the case. And you've got that story that you absolutely think is true. And the problem is that it is not true, but it's very true for you, which then keeps you hooked. And so I use a concept called grounding. And that means that when we have something that happens to us, that's kind of the pain part. Everything that comes after that is really the suffering part. So, for example, if a person doesn't call me back, that's what happened, period. That's it. He didn't call me back. Or let's say that I had a really good association with him at lunch or something, and he said he was going to call me back, and he didn't call me back. The problem is that we can then take that and go, well, why didn't he call me back? Well, something must be wrong with me. Oh, maybe I offended him. Maybe I'm kind of offensive with people. Maybe I should be careful when I meet with people again. Maybe I can be a turnoff. That's all the suffering part. All that happened is he didn't call you back. Now he could have, run into an accident. He could have, had a call from his wife, whatever. We don't know, but that's what we know, and that's what we work with. Because if we work with the other part and let our mind just take off and roll and roll and roll, then that's where we get into the suffering part. So you've got to be able to distinguish from what happens your interpretation with what happens and realize that your interpretation of what happens is not the truth. It is your interpretation of what the truth is. The truthful things are those that you can ground with solid facts and base evidence. And that's why I always say you got to shine a light on your interpretations and really ground them for what's true. Because look at all the ways I got on the tack and the family business on the basis of all those things that I thought were true, but were really not.
Yeah. So what do you do when there's somebody who's like, for instance, uh, you made me mad, you did this, the sort of blame way that we discuss about emotions, and then if you offer to them because this frequently happens in a lot of people's relationships and stuff, they start to learn things like this, and they're like, oh, I now know what's going on. You're interpreting this wrongly. That's why you're having a hard time. And they go, it's not my interpretation. You're the one that's doing this to me. How do you engage with that type of scenario?
Yeah, that's really good. And when you say, "Yeah, you're making me mad," the reality is no, you're choosing to be mad. Nobody is making you mad. Now, I mean, people can say offensive things or whatever, but the thing that I try to illustrate in the book is that we are human beings that have blind spots. And so what hurts us is not what we don't know, it's what we don't know. And when you have people out there, they can see things that you cannot see yourself. So if you take the perspective that whatever people are telling me is a way of giving feedback and information for me to be a better person, then you take it in a whole completely different light. Now, if somebody says, let's go back to our phone call, and you go to your friend, you see him, let's say at a restaurant or something, and you say, "Hey, how you doing, John? How come you didn't give a call back to me? I thought you were going to call me back." And he says, "Oh, yeah, sorry, but you know what? I really don't like you that much. Eh? You're kind of a jerk." And I go, "Oh, okay. Thanks very much for that feedback. Can you tell me in what way you thought I was a jerk?" "Oh, blah 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 blah." Okay, and then you get all this information. Now you look at it and say, "Okay, is any of that really valid? Can I use any of it? Does it help me? And if it helps me, great. Say thank you very very much. But if it doesn't, whoosh, I'm going to throw it right in the wastebasket and move on." Because I am using people as a source of saying how that I'm being. And I'm not going to be my complaint, I'm going to be my commitment.
Hmm.
So, for example, in a marriage, if your commitment is to have a good marriage, then that's what your commitment is. Now, when I've worked with friends and relationships and everything, they go, "Okay, my wife is this, she's this, blah, 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 blah." I go right back to them. I said, "Okay, great. Those are all the complaints. Now, what are you committed to? Are you committed to a great relationship?" "Yeah, I'm committed to a great relationship." "Okay, great. Then let's go to the commitment rather than our complaints, because the complaints are going to lead us right on the tack. The commitments are going to take us right off into an exciting future."
Hmm. Fair, right? Focus on what can be done, as I'll have my clients do frequently. Like, okay, that all happened.
Absolutely.
Nothing we can do
Absolutely.
about what happened. It's all happened. It's over. We're having this conversation now. What do you
Right.
want to do from here? And the
Right.
idea that complaining is a choice, misery is a choice, is one that's sometimes difficult to swallow. But it's like a revelation for people. Like, oh, I like don't have to hold on to this. They don't. Nobody's ever taught them in their life. You don't actually have to keep feeling this way. I mean, maybe you did, but like, okay, what do you want to do now? Is like a question that doesn't even register for most people. That they don't realize there's an option to not feel bad because our society has built around. You look at YouTube, like, oh, how can I be dramatically responsive or reactive to what's going on in all these different situations? So,
I'm going to give you something else that's going to be really hard to digest.
oh, yummy.
Anytime you make a choice, you give your right up to complain. Once you make a choice, you have no right to complain. And that is really hard for people because the complaint is kind of that way of being able to say, "Well, no, but I did because of this," or it's kind of way leading back into irresponsibility. But when you go, "No, I chose it. That's what I chose. That's what we're doing. I mean, we talk like the Iran War. That's a terrible, terrible thing. I have everybody has very mixed emotions on it or whatever. But if I'm the president and I go to the country and I said, "Hey, I'm scared of them getting a nuclear weapon, and so I'm going to make the choice that that's what we're going to do. We're going to stop that." Then when the heat comes in, you stand right up to your commitment and say, "That's what I'm committed to. That's the choice I made. We're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon. And I know it's not going to be pleasant. I know it's not going to be easy, whatever, but that's the choice I made." Rather than when the heat gets very hard, saying, "Well, yeah, it really wasn't my choice. I was pressured and I was trying to appease people or whatever." You see the difference? One stands up off the tack and says, "I'm going to be the person I choose to be." The other one tries to find a way to find justification.
Hmm. Okay, so tell me this. We have blind spots, all of us. I mean, I've developed methods for helping people find them. In your case, people come to you or you're trying to sort this out. You mentioned like, oh, pornography is you coping with it, or these behaviors are you coping with it. Very often, at least what I've seen in the years I've been in business helping all these different types of people, they have a difficulty even recognizing that that what they're dealing with, the thing they're trying to solve, is actually that is the solution they have to the actual problem. They don't know how to find what the real story is or what the worldview is that is producing all the negativity that they're then coping with. So, what do you do to help a person really get clear on what the story is or stories that are underneath all the stuff that's going on?
Well, one thing I don't like is the attitude of positive thinking, because to me, positive thinking is whipped cream over dog food.
Yeah, I
Let's
agree.
let's understand there's dog food there, okay? Putting whipped cream over it ain't going to change that it's dog food. So one of the things you've got to do is you've got to accept the way things are. And you got to say, "This is where I'm at. This is the state of where I'm at. This is where I'm at in this type of situation." So if you have an addiction problem, you can't run away from that. You got to say, "Yes, I have an addiction problem. Now, what am I committed to? Am I committed to keep on the addiction problem, or am I committed to get off of it? And am I committed to having, a better life? And if I committed to have a better life, then what are some very positive steps that's going to open up possibility for me to do that?" You see, what happens is that we come into this world and we are born like a baby who is loving, peace, and kind. But then this thing called life hits us. And all of these things, such as I was, got a bad grade in school, I was rejected by a girlfriend, I, had an accident that, caused me some problems, et cetera, creates layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. But underneath, there is that beautiful soul that's peaceful, loving, and forgiving. And the real successful life is not, making $1 billion or winning the Nobel Prize or doing all of that. Not that those things aren't wonderful, they're great, and that's wonderful, and it makes people have nice self-esteem and all of that. But the real purpose of life is to me is to take all of those layers that you have dealt for the purpose of living of life, peel them back, realize what those things are, what are not true, what are true, what you can live with, whatever, so that you can then at the end get right back to that peaceful state of being loving, kind, and forgiving. And if you start that way and you end that way, to me, that's success. That's success. Because the process of life is just about a journey. And it's all right to take a journey. In other words, we can go to the journey and take a wrong road. It's not the end of the world. We can get back on the right road and get to the point where we want to be. But the experience in itself is also the situation with beneficial. So let's not live back in the situation of our past. Let's not be ruled by that. Let's look at an exciting future and say, "Okay, where do I want to be? What is it that I want to become? What is it that's really important to me? What is it that I really value? What do I define as a really great life?" And then work towards that so that your interpretations don't become your complaints, but they become about your future. So in the situation with your wife, instead of having to complain, you're going, no, no, I'm going to go to my commitment. I'm going to interpret in the way of my commitment. So obviously, there's something that I'm not listening to her closely enough, or there's something that I'm not open to enough. My commitment has a great relationship. And to have a great relationship, you got to listen, you got to be kind. Do you see the difference? One leads to a complaint, and one leads to a commitment. And one is future based, and one is past based. And you got to get on the future based thinking, not on the past based thinking, because the past thinking will eat you alive.
So then you don't spend much time at all even trying to identify what the stories or the interpretations were in the past. You're just like, look, what are you committed to? What actions would take you there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no, because sometimes these past stories keep lingering on your mind, and you can, go in and say, um, uh, you can have these interpretations that come in that can get you down, but the difference is that you can then become aware and say, "Oh no, that's me being me again. No, I'm going to ditch that. That doesn't do me any good. Out I go." I mean, I can live with the interpretations that I was in Thatcher. I wasted a good part of my life. I could harbor on that, think about that, dwell on that, and say, "Wow, look at that, look at that." And it might be true. The problem is, so what? It's not doing me any good. It's not bringing me peace. It's not bringing me happiness. So what I've got to do is say, no, that was a learning experience. I really took a bad journey. And some people really go the wrong direction. They take the wrong exit and they go down the wrong road and have to go through a lot to get back onto the right road. But the fact is, it was a journey and they got there, and that's what's important. So nobody should ever feel discouraged about what road they've gone down or the missed things they've done. Just get right back on the road and let's have an exciting future and live a great life. And then you can look back on it on a way of saying, yeah, that was a really learning experience. And that's what my whole purpose of this whole book is to really tell people what road I took that was the wrong road. Don't take that road. Take this one. It will get you to where you want to be.
What do you suppose fed into your this like this ability to say, look, there's a certain purpose in life, there's a certain purpose in existence, and because not everybody does this, not everybody's willing to say, hey, look, it was a journey, um, and yeah, I made some mistakes, but the whole point is to get to the end of it. I'm fine. There's like a level of hope or something in you that says,
Right.
hey, there's more here, and there's a possibility of forgiveness, for say, or of change. Where did that come from for you?
Um, well, when you get off the tack, you're able to see things in a completely different light. I mean, I use an example of the book, kind of like the cork in the ocean.
Hmm.
And, if you take a cork and you push it down in the ocean, it wants to normally pop right back up to the surface. And so the problem is that we push our cork down, and then we block it with all sorts of things, old stories, blame, hurts, whatever, etc. And so this cork really wants to surface, but we're just not letting it happen. And so part of that thing is just allowing yourself to be the type of person that you really are in the beginning. And that was kind of the realization with me. It's like, hey, this is not who I am. This is not the type of person I am. I'm just going to allow myself to be the type of person that I'm going to am. And that means you kind of have to, keep the cork from hitting all those things blocking it and just letting it surface so that you can be who you really are.
So I'll share with my clients very frequently, sometimes the same person very frequently, that what defines a car is not the road construction it's been through, not the off-roading, not the dents, not necessarily any of that. The make and model of the car was there, no matter if you drive it in Alaska, in a swamp in Louisiana, somewhere in the middle of the Gobi Desert, or in the middle of like downtown Chicago, or a riot or anything. Like that doesn't change the identity of the car. And in like manner with a person, who you are is not what you've been through, not the thoughts you've had, not the music that's been on the radio. not any of those things. And so it sounds like in that moment with your friend who was looking at you with the, and telling you about the tack thing, there was like a moment where you were of realization, like, oh, I'm not these things, where before maybe you thought you were, right? I'm not the stories I've been telling. I am not
Exactly.
like the son that's hated. Like I had formed an identity. I'll call them fake IDs. Like you've just made a whole bunch of fake IDs, and you're like trying to get across the border with this like this is who I am thing.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and so you had a moment where there was an like a realization that the identity you thought you had was not actually the truth, and that you're and from what it sounds like is like that was the moment that gave you the drive to go through the difficulties and kind of reach toward what you realized you could possibly be. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that is very important is responsibility, is to see how you're a cause in the matter. So, for example, like I was in a group situation and I wasn't being very accepted well with the group. The tendency is saying, okay, it's their fault. I mean, I'm fine. It's their problem. I don't need to worry about it, whatever. But if you go back to the responsibility side, say, wow, what am I doing that's having them to react the way that they are? How is it that I can maybe change the way I am? And it's so interesting because when you change, people change too, not because you've dictated the change to them, but they're reacting to a different person. And so they naturally will then behave differently, and they won't even know that they're behaving differently. They'll just do it because their structure has changed. So I talk about change being structure, recurrence, and time. You can change so much by changing you. You have so much control over you. You have 100% control over that. You have very little control over others. But boy, I have found that when you change who you are being and you become a different person, people will then respond differently and go, wow, maybe I was wrong about that guy. He's quite a nice guy. Yeah, he's quite helpful. And it comes from then getting into that service mode of what can I do to help them? How can I share their concerns as great as my own? What can I do to kind of create the space? So I use kind of like the advantage of a helicopter that's kind of, trying to land in a bunch of trees. Problem is we usually put more trees up and we say land. And the helicopter says, no, there's too many trees there. I'm not going to land. But if we clear the trees away and say, well, now there's an opening, it doesn't mean the helicopter necessarily has to land because we don't have control of that. But we're providing an opportunity for them to land that they didn't have before. So what the real key is no guarantees, but just open up the possibility of being different. Open up the possibility of opening things up. And when you do that, as I had in my group setting, you start to really feel good with yourself. So, for example, there was a person that part of that group that I was having a real problem with. And so I said, okay, um, I'm going to have to take responsibility because it's important to me. It's causing me my problem. So I'm going to take this person to lunch. And I didn't go into the past things of this is why you don't like me and this is why I don't like you. It's just say, who are you and who am I? And we had a great lunch together. And we saw things in a different way. And the whole thing changed from that time forth. It was just great. I would go into him instead of saying, well, no, I'm going to avoid you. I don't like you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to go right up and greet him and say, how you doing? How's everything going? I found out that he had a lot of very tough, difficult situations that he was dealing with, that he was dealing with a lot of pressures and all of those types of things. All of those things were opened up to me just because I said to myself, how am I a cause in the matter and what possibilities can I create? And that's really the key. And when you get to the point where you get really good at being able to say, I'm on it, now I'm able to find a way to get off it, you start to gain a sense of self-esteem and real confidence. And then you can approach people in a completely different way. And they'll see you in a completely different way because of it.
Yeah. You make a point in your description in your book that there's a difference between pain and suffering. Do you want to go into that? Do you want to talk a little bit
Oh yeah.
about what that
Well,
is?
yeah, pain's part of life. It's inevitable. suffering is a choice. So if something happens to you, I don't, advocate of resisting that it didn't hurt, that it wasn't real, that it wasn't something that was really painful. No, it is. But now everything added on to it, that's where the suffering part comes in. I mean, when I came out of surgery on the hospital, I was sitting there going, oh, 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 and my wife just went to me and said, well, just breathe. So, in other words, I was reacting to the pain and saying, because this is pain, then I've got to, really react to more and more. That's all the suffering part. The pain was just the pain part. Yes, I feel it. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's really uncomfortable, but I don't have to agonize it. I don't have to, I can breathe. I can relax. I can kind of feel it. I can get mindful with it. I mean, John Kabat-Zinn had a great thing that he did in his clinic that he worked with chronic pain patients. And they would say, pain, I don't want you, don't be here, whatever. Well, pain is there, exists. So he didn't say push it away. He just said learn to make it part of your existence. Learn to make part of your existence. The suffering is when you're pushing it away, don't be there, I don't want it, it doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the suffering part comes in.
Yeah, so what do you make of the scientific kind of view of pain? Since it's a weird thing anyway, medical science has been studying it for a long time. There have been all sorts of theories dating back all the way to Descartes and beyond around pain, where the basic scientific consensus is that 100% of the time, pain is an opinion your brain has about something going on in your body. What do you make of that?
Uh, wow, that's a very good question. And I haven't got really delved into the scientific aspects of that. Are you talking about emotional pain or are you talking about physical pain? Like,
All what you experience as pain is so there's sensations in the body, right? There, and that's just sensation. It's just nerves firing, whatever it is. Whether
oh,
that's
yeah.
came from a thought that you had a thought and then your body reacted, or whether it came from stimulus from the outside world. So it could be either one. But 100% of the
No, no,
time,
well, okay, there's real pain. So for example, I had been to the dentist and I had put that off and put that off and put that off and put that off for 7 years. So then they came back and they had to clean my teeth and whatever. And because there had been so much plaque buildup or whatever, I mean, they did it without the Novocaine or whatever, and that was uncomfortable. That was real pain. Yeah, that exists, no question about it. I mean, you break your arm, you break your leg. It's painful. That's the body, telling the
so
mind
so
something
so yeah, where
something's
science would tell
wrong.
you is that's not actually what's happening. They'll say that there's nerves firing and then the brain is going, that's painful, and then it's creating a reverse message to create a pain sensation. So the pain sensation is not created by the
Well,
stimulus.
partially that is true. That's why pain medication works, right? Because painkillers do what? They block the signals to the brain. So that you're in a lot of pain, but you're not seeing it because the brain's not registering back and saying, "Hey, this is painful." So yeah, that's how I think painkillers work. They block the signals to register through the brain. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, cool. So when you're in that situation and you go, okay, so then we're talking about a difference between pain and suffering. It doesn't sound like you're talking about that dynamic. It sounds like you're talking about whatever uncomfortable thing is happening. Yes, we admit that it's happening. The suffering is how long I prolong it by complaining, resisting, all that
It's
other
the
stuff.
added part. It's
Yeah,
the added part. The what happens is the pain part. Ouch, that hurt. Yes, fine. It did hurt. No
okay.
problem about it. But then the suffering is the added part. The interpretations, the story, whatever. For example, like my friend Brian, he had a situation where he had a patch on his eye. It was a story that he kind of built upon himself, saying, "Well, I don't know if women are going to find this very attractive. I don't know if my friends are going to think or whatever." That
Okay.
story then was more than just the patch. It became a lot more than just the patch. And then when he got rejected by his girlfriend, Then that story became very real, and he was then, like I was, looking for like a magnet of everything that will support my story because I'm going to validate it that that's really true for me. And it got to the point where it was so true that he says, I have no friends, I have no life, nobody loves me, whatever. So I want to leave this life. Now, when I was at the funeral, his father was in tears, and I was up and I went up to his father and he talked to me and he says, Tom, Brian said that he had no friends. Look at all these people in this room. What do you mean he had no friends? And that's where the suffering really does you in, right? Because sure, it's uncomfortable to have a patch on your eye, and sure, you're subconscious about it. But you know, there's a lot of people who can say a patch in the eye is manly and wow, that really is cool. And that's really neat or whatever. So it's all of kind of what you allow your story. And it's like there's something inside your head that just never stops. It's always running, it's always talking to you, it's always whatever. Sometimes it can be very formative and very helpful, but other times it can be very detrimental. The key is to say, listen, I'm in charge of this. You're not in charge. I'll take the information. I'm not going to be ruled by it. I'll just be informed by it. So you go in, the person doesn't call you back. Your brain's going, wow, something must be wrong with you. Well, wait a minute, wait a minute. No, no, you can't verify that. Stop talking a minute. Just silence, whatever. I'm gonna find a way to get you exited out of my mind. So I'm gonna write this all down on a piece of paper. All right, you've had your say. Now shut up. Now I'm gonna look at that piece of paper and say, okay, really, what is really true here? That doesn't sound right. Because then you can become aware and make good, responsible choices. So this thing can be helpful, but it can be so damaging that it can turn people into being suicidal, burning themselves up for a purpose of showing the world that something is wrong. I mean, it can lead them into destruction if they let it. And the key is we have to be in charge.
Okay. So, a personal question, if I may, and answer
Absolutely.
as much as you're
Sure.
comfortable with. Um, I Are you a religious person? And if you are, how much does that play into and inform this particular approach to suffering?
I'm glad you asked me that. Yes, I am a religious person. I'm not one that, is kind of a flag waver and says, hey, everybody, I'm religious or whatever. But I definitely believe in God. My definition of God is a higher source and whatever. And I do espouse the LDS faith, and I do believe that. But, there is also for other people higher sources, whatever they can identify with. But I always think there's got to be something higher than ourselves and that we can get to that can give us on the ability for information. And I believe that we're in the best communication with God or wherever our higher source is when we're off the tack because then God can communicate with us and talk to us and work with us because we're not blaming others. Because sometimes on that blaming, I talk about the pedestal in the book, and sometime on the step of blame, we can even blame God. We can say, God, you're the reason. Yeah, I'm not going to talk to you. You're at fault or whatever. So when we get off all that blame and we get off the tack, then we can start to really communicate and connect and get awareness and whatever. And that inspiration upon the basic foundation that we have with like the tack philosophy or whatever works for us is really the icing on the cake that helps us to have inner wisdom greater than we would normally have. And that's so yes, I am a big believer in God.
Okay, cool. So and it's nice to see, okay, cool, you're seeing this not only be um, useful in managing relationships, but it also ultimately helps to benefit your relationship with God. You know,
Oh,
it,
absolutely. Because when I was on the tack, I'm saying, God, you're not getting me off the tack. What's the problem here? Don't you love me? Don't you care about me? Whatever. And I could hear God saying back to me, Tom, I can't, you have free agency. So if you want to sit there, that's your choice. I'm not going to be able to, force you to get off. But once you get off, I'll be right here for you. And that's the key. And I think people sometimes look for God in ways where God is saying back to them, hey, I love you. I care about you. You really are important to me. But unfortunately, I've given you the gift of free agency. And if you want to destroy yourself, you can. And if you want to be miserable, you can. And if you want to suffer, you can. And you can look for me to say, don't let me do that. In other words, take away my free agency and force me to be something else. And a loving God saying, no, I'm not going to do that, unfortunately. And so if you want to go 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, with um, resentment or blame or hatred or whatever you got, I'm going to let you do it. I'm going to let you do it because you've got that choice. And then you go in and say, oh my gosh, that's what responsibility really means. I'm not, I'm looking to the real power that is inside of me and realizing that the power is all right there, that was there all the time. I just got to use it. I just got to use it. Quit looking outside for all this other power source when it's right inside of you because it's there.
Cool. So final question, is there anything I should have asked that would be useful that we haven't discussed that would be helpful for people listening?
I just want the people and your listeners to be very loving and kind to themselves, to not, get down on themselves. I mean, there's two great commandments, right? The one is love God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. But then there's a second commandment that's very, very important. Love thy neighbor as thyself. So your capacity to love others comes from the capacity of you loving yourself. And I really believe, and I will say this very sincerely, that if you will work to get off the tack, that if you will become racket free, complaint free, committed, courageous, at peace, forgiving, loving, and kind, you are going to find happiness and joy and confidence and self esteem like you cannot believe. And, there, I believe that every human being has some type of purpose and a place. Some might be greater. God might call human beings to greater positions. It's stated that in the New Testament, where blessings were given to, certain um, children, and different blessings were given to others. But it doesn't mean that not everybody's loved. It just means people fill different roles and in different ways. And when you can celebrate another person's success, you know that you are starting to be very, very whole because you can enjoy another person's success as well as you can join your own. That's wholeness, and that's what healthiness is all about. So I really hope that your listeners will, if they have some concerns or whatever, reach out to me. If they have questions, they can reach me at the Tack Philosophy gmail.com. I will try to answer every question that I get. I do videos all the time. They can comment on those. And my goal is to help and to share. And we can learn so much by sharing with others. Everybody has such a unique experience and beautiful things to tell. And that's all we need to do is learn how to share and love.
That's great. Well, thank you, Thomas, for your time. If you want to get in touch with him, everybody, he has a YouTube channel. What's the YouTube channel called? Is it just Tack?
Let's see. Let's see. I don't know. I think you just type on YouTube Tom Thatcher. I can't. It's like author.thomas.thatcher, I believe is what it is
Okay, there you
on
go.
YouTube.
Find him on there. Search the Tack Philosophy. You'll probably find that on YouTube. He has his book. It's on Amazon, the Tack Philosophy. Um, so you can check that out as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Cool. So, any other things?
What? What? You are an excellent interviewer. I mean, my gosh, those were deep, thoughtful, provoking questions. I mean, I really was thinking the whole time through. You really are skillful that way.
Thank you.
My goodness. I just thought that, have you, in your experience with depression and all that thing, found it very hard to pull yourself out of that? I mean, it is really a challenge, isn't it, for some of your listeners, right?
Wait, yeah, it's interesting because, I was addicted to pornography. I was addicted to drugs. I was suicidal and depressed for a long time. And then I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps and find a solution when the 12-step programs were abysmal at helping. And, searched the globe for stuff, and it was difficult. And then after a while, it's been so long that I forgot how difficult it is when you're in the middle of it to even know what to do and know the answer and still being like, and I can't, I'm just in it, and that's all. And they find that very, very difficult.
And how did you pull yourself out?
Well, my wife threatened divorce, and so I had a
Okay.
bigger dragon to fight.
There's the cost. The cost is outweigh the payoff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I had a bigger dragon to fight, and that gave me the initial motivation. Because on my own, I mean, I was trying things, but I would always just fall back into the same cycle over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I actually tried to commit suicide, and I just was such a chicken. I just said, oh, suicide seems so painful. And so that's when I, got into the idea that, okay, I mean, there's no, there's either two choices. You're either going to get busy living or you're going to get busy dying, plain and simple.
Mm.
And sometimes you've got to get to the absolute end before you can start again. You have to get it really, really bad.
It
And
happens more often than
sometimes,
I wanted to admit,
yeah, I know. Absolutely.
I wanted to
Absolutely.
be like, no, no, people don't have to hit rock bottom. Well, it seems like it happens a lot.
It does. It does. It
It
absolutely.
seems like it happens a lot. Yeah. Well, thank you for your
Hey, but
time.
great job. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. It was a very fun hour.
Oh, good.